Hi, my name is Sophia Telles, my keynote number 6246, and the question I will be addressing for the CCR1 is how does my product use or challenge conventions, and how does my film opening represent social groups and issues? So the film title is The Night Stalker, and my film is rated R due to disturbing psychological themes, brief visuals of gore and triggering content, of mental instability and violence that comes with multiple personality disorder. This rating was chosen to fully convey the emotional weight and rawness of the protagonist's dissociative episodes, which may be intense for some younger audiences. We took infographic and Google Forms of the age ranges, and although the common age range was 13 through 18, there was some bias since most of the survey was taken in school. So this film is focused on 16 and older, obviously with a parental supervisor, but yeah, so the film is produced by the A24 company. It is an independent film company, production company, and it's known for its horror movies and producing psychological thrillers like Hereditary, Midsummer, and The Witch. It aligns perfect with the nature of my film and the concept of it. So first we start off with the opening shot, which is the vinyl record. Here we see lots of red coloring, and there's a close-up of the vinyl record through a boom shot when it elevates to a bird's eye view, and it focuses on the word dissociative. This is done to show the symbolic representation and foreshadows the rest of the film. It is an important visual because it establishes the psychological theme of the film and its inner turmoil. So the genre is psychological thriller, and the narrative begins with an immediate focus on the protagonist's mental state. So by adding the word dissociate, it helps add context to what the viewer should expect, and the red coloring and the music playing in the background helps bring the aspect of horror or psychological thriller towards this. The final record, as we do a boom shot and go up to a bird's eye view, we do a cut to a TV with static. We want to accentuate the static to show the sense of isolation and feeling lost. So we decided to do a local news where it's an emergency report, where it's like a nightly program that focuses on the Night Stalker. Now we wanted to make sure that this is very clue for the audience, where we mention the kids of the mother through their last name and John and Katie. The camera movement is slow. This is all editing from this part. Ellie Run did it, contributed a lot towards the entire thing of the TV and the Night Stalker, along with the emergency voice to increase the urgency of this. So when it glitches here, it represents the state of mind as well, instability, and as it's an ongoing loop, it can symbolize the protagonist's spiraling thoughts. So the sound is static, also builds an unsettling atmosphere for the audience. It is meant to represent the protagonist's fragmented thoughts and distortion of her reality. Here, we do a jump cut to 2 days earlier, so we go from a different time for context. So here, there's a two-man shot, an establishing two-man shot to show the location, that they are at a Wendy's. We wanted them to have a drink. To make it seem natural, with the wallet and phone as they are conversating. So as she's taking out the pills, it's supposed to be symbolic towards the mental state. We wanted to make her dress kind of messy and not in the right presentation to show her psychological breakdown and to show her inner deterioration that reflects on the outside. With the shot, we see her friend as she's talking to her. The camera slowly moves to the diner, establishing the setting and the wide shot of the space. The lighting is neutral and soft, as it is natural lighting, and it gives the diner an almost normal feel that's different and contrasts with the psychological tension of most movies. In this scene, we are introduced to the protagonist and her friend, who seems unaware of the protagonist's anxiety. So this builds psychological tension towards the audience as we see the protagonist paranoia and nervousness. Her expressions, I tried my best to show expressions. I also added makeup and costuming to add to that cluttered mindset and a messy lifestyle. So she is a worried mother. In her dialogue, she mentions her children, thinking about the Night Stalker, and the woman on the right is simply her supportive friend. There's a hint of stereotypical role in women in domestic and maternal spaces, and I play with these conventions, showing the protagonist as more of a complex character and not a typical person that maybe a killer would go for or killer would be. So there is ambient sound in the background showing the protagonist's overwhelming sense of the outside world. Here there's a stalker shot. It's a cut shot to her pill bottle where it says Melissa Brown. All of this is done to foreshadow her disorder, as this medicine is taken for the specific identity disorder. Here we see a close-up. Eliron decided to add a vintage surrounding to make it seem as if it's a vintage camera just stalking and zooming in. So the person with the camera is introduced, and we don't see anything of him. He is a character without a face. So by using a POV shot from the man's perspective, it makes the audience feel like an observer, and it plays into the stereotype of a stalker-like film. We did this to do a red herring and distract the audience of who really the killer is. So sound and music, there's a subtle rise in ambient noise. It becomes silent as if this camera is just to touch that inner isolation and what a stalker film would ultimately show. And it really does show the paranoia of the mother. So here we play with some stereotypes of the stalker, although it's not the typical stereotype with the mother and her friend. Her friend is a typical stereotype. She seems unaware and doesn't really see the circumstances of this. So as we exit here, it is made to show her movements and also her expressions. This over-the-shoulder shot shows her expression in the perspective of her friend. However, she doesn't seem to know what's going on, and as she spots the stalker, parentheses, we're not sure, she tends to resort to her stress and decides to leave. So she takes away her pill bottle, which she thinks is a center of the attention, and leaves. Here we use full dialogue. There's nothing really. We use the background music and overall the natural sounds and soft lighting that is not usually seen in a horror movie or a horror concept. Here we use the Dutch angle to portray this sense of urgency. Here we use another stalker-like perspective in which we use the camera again. And we do use a handheld shaky for both stalker parts. We use a handheld shaky camera perspective to make it seem like it's a stalker. And as she's driving away, we do a jump cut again to a different setting where she is now in her home washing two bowls for her children, as she has two children. Here we decided to use a prop of the knife to symbolize and foreshadow what is ultimately going to happen. And as she does this, we use a POV shot. I strapped a GoPro around my head. We tried putting the phone in a Ziploc bag and put it in my mouth. However, it wasn't working. So we wanted to portray that POV shot as well as we could. So we put a GoPro on my forehead, strapped it in, and so as we did that, I wanted to clean the bowls quick, and here we left two. So I wanted to symbolize that, the two colors. The red was ultimately showing the blood and what is to come. Here, as she washes her hand with a POV shot, once again, she does call out their names to symbolize, her children. And as she washes, she sees blood on her arm. So the protagonist is now home preparing dinner for her children, and it doesn't play along with the normal horror or psychological thriller aspects. It's supposed to represent her mental state by the POV distorted shot, And once we see the blood on her arm, it marks a break from that illusion of this perfect mother that's, with children. So that quick cut to her bloody hands symbolize violence and guilt, and marks the turning point and the plot twist in the narrative, where the protagonist realizes who she really is, although she wasn't aware of it. The water is running to show the scene and the sharp contrast of every day. It does create a distorting atmosphere. The shock, the editing is done by doing a quick jump with a black fade and flash. Here I tried my best shaking my hands and creating that stereotype of that terrified disorder in which they are not aware of who is in control. We did a dolly backup to show the atmosphere. Although a dolly is supposed to be in a stable position, we wanted also to add a handheld effect to add to that distortion in the atmosphere. And we see a body on the floor, which is supposed to symbolize the kid that she killed. Here we screamed. I had to scream and do an emotional scene. I've never acted before, so this was interesting, and I really liked channeling that. Here we did a over-the-shoulder shot and a boom shot to introduce this new character, where he walks up to the door, and as he's about to knock, he drops his clipboard. The angle of the man standing outside her house with the clipboard serves as a cliffhanger, leaving the audience wondering what he knows about her and what will be part of the imminent danger. Here's the high angle shot, or bird's eye view, that ultimately shows the police report, showing that the stalker was never the stalker, however he was the detective. And all these different things show that she is the suspect overall. And through this plot twist, throughout the movie, it's basically her fighting against this personality, and she doesn't want to go to jail, so she still fights against going towards it and trying to escape this other person that's making her life hell. So the clipboard becomes a central symbol of control and surveillance. The details in the police report are chilling and suggest that the protagonist's life is being watched and investigated, which adds to the psychological horror. So the camera slowly zooms in on the clipboard, focusing on the ominous red question marks next to her name. For the title card, we decided to do a sketched title card. The knight is purposely made in red and in black to show the dual personalities, while stalker is shown in red. So we did want to use that stalker stereotype to include that social group of psychological themes. However, it was a switch where she turns out to be the night stalker, the night killer, and the detective was never it. So here we decided to fade in. We used a hairdryer to blow away the paper. And here we fade in, directed by Eliran Argate, Sophia Tellez, and Alexis Lee, and we do a fade out. So overall, this is shown through symbolic props, sound codes, mise-en-scène, and camera techniques, which helps build the psychological tension. We used sound aspects, editing, and camera movements and camera angles to symbolize specific clues that leads to the conclusion of the DID and helps add to the psychological horror genre. Thank you.